Hi, I was the Women's Center coordinator from apparently 1985 to 1987 to 1990. I had to check on those dates, they didn't come readily in my mind. And there's a big gap between Diane Lupton and me, it's about 10 years there. And during that time, there's the list. When I came into the position, I followed Carol Beauchamp Ross, and there was a lot of things in place that were rolling along. The Women's Festival was happening every summer. There was a strong volunteer corps that organized that. There was International Women's Day activities that were organized every year, and there was Take Back the Night events. While the one thing that has become an annual event that took place during the time I was there is the massacre in Montreal. Took place during that period, and as we were all sort of reeling from it and sort of looking at each other and trying to think how to respond, Jane Steed came into the center and said, we have to do something, we have to do something now, and was instrumental in nudging me into, and she did a lot of the organizing, and we held the first memorial that year. What I remember most clearly about my time there is that we moved, and we moved, and we moved. After many years at the Jam Factory, a big stone building down there, we were given our eviction notice so that H&R Blocks could expand. And we moved. It was a hard time. We couldn't find very good quarters. We ended up down on Front Street in a dark, dank, dismal and damp location. Every time it rained heavily, the toilet overflowed. The sump pump rumble, I don't remember that, but it was not a good time. And people had to cross Front Street. I always had this vision of this young woman with her baby in a stroller, running across Front Street to get to us because there was no crosswalks on Front Street in that area. But we moved there, we survived there, and then we moved up to Hall Street, above Jarrett Cycle, which the co-op was there then. Which, although the access still wasn't great, women with babies and strollers still had a very long stairway to get up. At least it was bright and light and closer to downtown, and was an improvement. The year we were down on Front Street in the dismal place, I remember Penny Bonnet working. It seemed like full time, looking for funding. We had struck a committee before we left Vernon Street, and we had a special general meeting and approved getting a mortgage. We could find a building. And Penny spent that whole winter, it seemed like, researching funding sources, trying to find someone to give us money to provide enough of a down payment that we could actually buy a facility. And so then we actually moved to Hall Street. Nothing came of it for a few years. After I wasn't the Women's Center coordinator anymore, but one of the big involvements I had, one of the things that's still dear to my heart is we managed to actually buy the house on Mill Street. And we found money to do the renovations by getting a training grant. And we hired Jane Barker and Catherine Fisher and Grace Scott. Thank you.
And Sally Mackenzie.
I was the person doing the training, and we hired those other women as trainees, and then Grace didn't finish the project. Cher Knox took her place towards the end, and we totally gutted the downstairs of that house, and we just took it right back to the outside walls, which was a wonderful experience because it was 100 years old, and there was things behind the walls, newspapers and razor blades and bits of this and that. And so we managed to get an extension on that project so that we were actually able to finish it. We finished laying the carpets and did a few bit of trim boards, as people were wheeling the filing cabinets in the front door. My sister Suzanne and Maggie Shirley and Pat Griffiths and I were the housing committee during the time of the renovation, and I remember we used to meet weekly at it's the New China restaurant now, it wasn't then. Pardon? Shamrock, yes, we used to have breakfast meetings there. And, discuss where we were and what had to happen in the next week and what decisions we needed to make. And the house eventually became the G. Mackenzie House, named after my mother, in recognition of I think the whole Mackenzie family's contribution, but in recognition of her, activities in the community and participation. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the other big change in the time that I was actually the coordinator is that we got operational funding. We had been operating on Secretary of State project grants from the time that, I don't know when the first one happened, but for a long time, 1973. And those grants were given to us to do specific projects, not to operate the Women's Center, not to have a drop-in, not to provide the support and the counseling and things that we provided at the Women's Center, but to do specific projects. So in addition to running the Women's Center out of that money, we also had to, every year, and it's not like there was any shortage of work we wanted to do, but we had to come up with other projects of research or specific advocacy, things like that we wanted to do. And so in the time that I was the coordinator, I was very involved with the BC and Yukon Women's Centers Association, and we had an NDP government again. And the Ministry of Women's Equality with Penny Pretty, we negotiated with her, and they gave us operational funding so that we finally had money to do the work the Women's Center had always done, as well as money to do the advocacy and lobbying and research that we also do. So those were the two big things. I actually quit my job at the Women's Center so that I could work with the BC and Yukon Association Women's Centers, which was, of course, not a paid position. But you know how that goes. So